So my number three film is the only movie that I'm bringing to the list that is released this year, and it was, or it is, The Creator, released this year, written and directed, co-written and directed by Gareth Edwards, starring John David Washington, Gemma Chan, Allison Janney, and Madeline Voiles. The IMDb plot summary: against the backdrop of a war between humans and robots with artificial intelligence, a former soldier finds the secret weapon, a robot in the form of a young child. So one major theme that for me out of this year is, and maybe for a lot of different folks, is this new focus now on AI again. I mean, I feel like
Hmm.
every couple decades we're like, oh, robots could, eventually take over for humans with artificial intelligence. But this year I do think we reached a tipping point. And it was
Hmm.
something not only was big in the news, also my job, I think we've shared in the past before, like both of us are in tech. And I think this is something that is here to stay as a technology, especially with Chat GPT. I really think was the tipping point of really bringing this to a point where a average person could sort of understand
Right.
and harness the power of what artificial intelligence could do. And at the same time, I think there were a lot of things I was thinking about this year too, of the downsides of this, of replacing humans and a lot of creativity. That was a big theme of, we had a big strike this year for WGA, the Writers Guild in Hollywood, and SAG, the Actors Guild, and AI was a big part of this. Don't replace
Hmm.
us with AI. I also feel kind of threatened as well, with my job at some point being replaced. And there's a lot of these questions about the negative sides of AI. But what this film, which it is flawed, and I'll get more into the film later, but it actually positions AI more as a sort of a next stage of human evolution, these AI robots more as people. So
Mm.
it was interesting to me coming into this movie, and again, AI in general, being kind of skeptical about it and seeing more of the bad than the good applications of this, that this movie actually maybe kind of opened my eyes a little more to, what, actually, like, especially if these do become, maybe this is a life, right? An AI could be considered similarly to having a soul, right? And at that point, then we should be treating them on the same level as humans. Which what this film grapples with is that basic choice. I mean, there's a opening montage that's a great one of like a newsreel, which is essentially an alternate past of like, well, what if in the 50s and 60s we were developed AI technology? How would that evolve to the point where in the present in this film, which I think is probably like the mid 21st century, the AIs are actually just as good as humans, and there's a attack that happens where Los Angeles gets nuked, and then all of a sudden, the United States at least is very much against AI and
Mm.
fighting, fighting against them and trying to exterminate them across the world, and just positioning the AIs as victims as opposed to the oppressors, which is typically what a lot of movies do, right? HAL
Mm.
9000 or The Matrix or Terminator. This movie presented them as a victim. So like, huh, well, maybe I shouldn't be as skeptical against AI and thinking all just the bad things. I mean, yeah, bad things can happen, but there also could be a lot of good as well with, a new phase of our evolution as just living beings. So I'm kind of paused there, but that was why I wanted to bring something in with AI. And I was thinking about maybe some older movies. And then I saw this one and I was like, oh, wow, this actually made me think differently about artificial intelligence in a way that I don't think I would have if I hadn't seen this film, which again, it is flawed. And maybe we can talk more about the actual film in a bit, but curious
Yeah.
on your thoughts on AI and as well as this film.
Yeah, similarly, there is obviously a feeling of scare and all the bad things that could happen, but at the same time, it's obviously kind of a massive leap forward in terms of how we as a society and civilization can accomplish things
Mhm.
and collaborate with each other and deepen and just make our pursuit for whatever we are after better and richer. There's no question. It kind of multiplies that by a whole lot.
Mhm.
So I feel like even before the movie, I've been in kind of both those camps that this has, like all things that have a lot of power, right? If not
Mhm.
used properly and if not put to the right context, they can have a lot of harm, but they can also have a lot of great.
Mhm.
So, in many ways, it sort of comes back to the humans. Because guess what? What is the AI repeating after and multiplying after? It's the patterns that it is learning from that were created and done by humans in the first place, right?
Mhm.
So, in many ways, that all the theories of AI kind of owning the world and doing bad things, it's not going to have that out of thin air. It's going to mirror and replicate based on what we've sort of taught it in a way.
Hmm.
So, if anything, I sort of feel that the accountability on us as humans even doubles with a technology like this being out there. And I think in a way the movie kind of underlines that too, because the problems that happen where things go haywire, it was because an error in the code that humans
Hmm.
made, right?
Right.
So it's very much in there. Now, can AI and machines have feelings, and are they humans that we are friends with in that sense? I don't know. Maybe it's sort of, I'm not there yet to kind of
Hmm.
fully say that. And the movie obviously makes that case that they have feelings. And of course, if you have like a little cute child, the way it is in this movie, who looks the way she does, the way she talks, she's just so cute.
Hmm.
Of course, that has an impact. But the movie asks some good questions, intentionally or unintentionally, that is that a manipulation of the movie and even AI, that now you're, as a human, starting to look at this child robot as an actual child, or should you even be doing that, and I think that's a question that we'll keep kind of bumping against and keep trying to answer over the next few decades as this becomes more and more real.
Yeah, and I think I'd always looked at that as a bad thing, meaning like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't get to even the point where we'd even have that question. Like, I want to
Yeah.
try to save our species before we get replaced. But what this movie, I think, does is, and I think this does come from Gareth Edwards, who his past couple films he did Godzilla, and then his first film was Monsters from
Hmm.
like an indie film. And I think definitely his worldview is humans are awful, and the sooner we're exterminated as a race, the better. That seems to be his worldview, which I don't agree with. But seeing this movie, I'm like, actually, the way that they position the humans as being really terrible in this, and the robots actually are the ones who want peace, don't want to be attacked. They don't want to cause any problems. They just want to live their lives. But it's the Americans slash the bad side of humanity, right? It's just trying to exterminate them. I was thinking, which maybe is again the thing that this movie wants you to think is, yeah, maybe they are the better versions of us. Like
Mm.
they're the best sides of our nature, and in this movie, at least, the Americans represent the worst sides of humanity, like the absolute like worst things that we ever could do are what the Americans do in this. And you're kind of like, yeah, maybe they should be exterminated. Like this is maybe better for the world if they were gone and actually the AIs were the ones replacing humans. And I think the movie does that subtly too with some scenes where animals, like some dogs and then monkeys, are like helping out the resistance fighters against
Mm.
the Americans. Like they're placing bombs and it's very subtle. They only kind of do in a couple scenes and they never address it. It's not like the animals are they talk or they're being used as troops from the resistance fighters or anything. But it's sort of, I think, is saying this thing of like, we're now like even nature is against the Americans and then therefore like the dark side of humans. And I thought that made me think a little bit more of like, maybe actually not that I say I want the extermination of the human race. However, if I think of it more of an evolution standpoint of, well, the next part of us is we are the creators of something else, and all the good that is in humans gets programmed into these AIs. And as long as there is a life and a quote unquote soul in there, maybe that is the where we're gonna go as a species. As like our bodies are die off and things, and now we are just gonna be code, which maybe we're code in some semblance right now anyway. Just sort of electromagnetic, brain impulses and things like that, and DNA. I mean, this is all essentially could be viewed as code. And I don't know, I just never thought about it in that way of opening my mind up a little bit until I saw this film, which again, I don't think is perfect. I think the setup is great, the world building is incredible, but it
Hmm.
falls apart very fast, like over the course as the movie
Yeah,
goes
it's too
along.
convoluted.
It's like, yeah, too much stuff doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And by the end, I'm like, this is just too long. Like, I don't really care what's happening. There's a whole sequence at the end with John David Washington on a spaceship as they're
Yeah.
trying to like destroy it. And I'm just sort of like, I don't know, get like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
end movie. Like,
And the
I'm done.
movie. Yeah. It's too many
But
holes.
right, but I do think it raised a lot of really interesting questions that
Agreed.
about this topic that I was very sort of more of a Luddite against of like we should slow down, stop. Like this is not necessarily it's more of a bad than a good. But after this movie, I was like, I don't know, maybe like we could there could be more of a balance there. It just depends on who's wielding the power, which I think is another thing this movie also touches on again with the Americans in this movie representing like the worst use of technology possible.
Yeah,
This sort of floating death spaceship that just kind of can go anywhere in the world and kill anyone that they want, totally unaccountable, unaccountable to anyone, which I do think represents a lot of what America is, at least in the 21st century. One of the most anti-American movies I've seen in a really long time, actually. I don't know if you kind of got that
yeah,
sense too, but like they were definitely the villains fighting against the rest of the world and also the AIs, which I thought was interesting as well. But I think this movie should be seen personally, like
yeah,
from especially a production standpoint, it looks beautiful. Just
yeah.
incredible cinematography and
Especially at
action.
the budget it's at, it's
Oh
amazing.
my God, yeah. Yeah, it looks like it costs as much as Avatar, like $400 million,
Yeah.
but it's like 80 million. Like that's
Yes.
insane. But I wish it was there on the story standpoint too. It just I think it's the story is very middling. The acting's not great either from John David Washington, who's
No,
someone I don't think is that good of it. I still just don't think he works in really anything I've seen him in,
I agree.
unfortunately. But I did think the film again raised a lot of interesting questions.
I agree. And yeah, whether it's extermination or whether it's coexistence, that's the question the movie also asks. Because the flip side is that, yeah, like I was saying earlier, AI ultimately is based off of what it's learning in terms of
Hmm.
human patterns and behaviors. The issue is that AI has the capability or capacity to just scale so rapidly
Hmm.
across the entire world, which no single human or group of humans can ever do. It'll take years and years, right, for a dictator or a certain military power to kind of rise up
Hmm.
to have that kind of control. AI can do that in a matter of probably seconds if
Hmm.
it were at that scale. And that sort of is the big danger, I think, is to how do you sort of coexist and keep that in check. But then you bring up an interesting argument that if human emotion and creativity and that DNA, maybe its evolution is to exist in this sort of form. It
Right.
that I never thought about that before the movie. And yeah, I still don't know how I feel about it, because
Yeah.
if that's the case, then what is all this about anyway? If we are just like consciousness coded somewhere, with it's so untangible in my mind
Hmm.
right now that
Hmm.
I can't even wrap my head around it. But it's certainly a thought.
Yeah.
I can sort of see it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was a scene that where they're explaining one of the AIs like switched herself off, like basically committed suicide when her AI child was dead, or so like that is a like killing yourself because of loss was that is a
Mm,
human trait that
mm.
when they said that I was like, oh, well then these are like basically they have souls, they are alive, which I think was the movie that's why they put those lines in there, but yeah, I was thinking, yeah, well then what's the difference between us and them? And maybe they're better than humans. But yeah, it is a lot of
Yeah,
heady. This movie raised a lot of very heady
a
things.
lot of
It
heady thing.
doesn't answer them, and I think it doesn't kind of throws the theme out there and then kind of runs away from it a lot of times. Which again, I don't think this movie was perfect. It needed like one or two more passes on the screenplay, and then maybe hire a better lead. And then this movie, I think, really would be a classic in terms of how it deals with these things that are very resonant in
Yeah.
2023, at least for me, for sure. And
Oh
it,
yeah,
it helped me
for me
change my
too.
mind on some things.
I think that the key thing is that these questions cannot be answered. In my mind,
Hmm.
like if the movie had like fewer questions and then just kind of lets them sit and be and breathe for us to kind of wrestle with, I think it's a much more successful movie because we are in it right now. I don't think we
Hmm.
have the answers, and having an answer one way or the other would also ring false, because it'll be preachy and just not backed entirely, because we just don't know.
Right,
But
right, right.
yeah, no, it's an interesting time, but a scary time too. I don't think we can litigate all of AI on this
Oh,
podcast
right, yeah.
for
Maybe we can have
sure.
another
But
episode about it.
yeah, the movie did ask some great questions that changed my mind towards, but I'm still more in. There's a scare part to it too, I think, for
Hmm.
sure, just because of how out of control this can be. And I guess the thing that we've not mentioned is the whole thing of the nirmata and stuff like that, right? Which is like, who is the creator ultimately? And
Right.
I think that's the other thing that the movie raises, is that what right do we have to be creators of machines that in some ways then we are assuming the role of God or
Right.
whoever the power might be. And is
Hmm.
that okay or not?
Right,
That's the
right.
real question.
Right, totally. Yeah, like humans. I think the movie toys around with that word creator. I mean, is it Gemma
Yeah,
Chan? Is it John David Washington? Because he's
right,
sort of the surrogate dad of the child, who's the new
right,
evolution because the child can age as an AI. But no, I think those are the largest questions of all. Right? Can't do. Are we? If we have the opportunity to be gods, should we? And
right.
by doing this, does that automatically de facto make us a god if we are creating a new species, technically like a new species or a new life form like that? And then what are all
Right.
the
And
implications that come
right.
across
And
with
if we
that,
are horrible, like the movie shows, then should we even be that? We
Right.
probably shouldn't,
Right.
And
It's a power
then
that we don't deserve.
right. And then the children that we are going to be making are not going to be good for overall humanity anyway. So it sort
That's
of
true.
defeats the entire argument.
That's true. I mean, it goes back in my mind with like, like you were saying in the beginning of this discussion, technology is neither good or bad. It's just how you use it. So in
Right.
whose hands is this technology placed? And that's where if I do have faith that there are a lot of good parts of humanity and that there are systems we can create where a technology like that can be handled in a way that is benefits society
Right.
versus not. But it also could very easily fall into the hands of
Yeah.
these systems and these controls where no, this is all just about taking away everyone's job, funneling more money up to the top of the richest people get richer and the poor people get even poorer, and they're not even necessary anymore. We can just
Yeah.
let them all die off because we don't need to exploit them for their labor. We can just use these AIs, or like using AIs to do creative things, which I think is way a bridge too far. I mean, AIs
Yeah.
can't be creative. The whole definition of creativity is come up with something no one else has done. And
Yeah.
AIs have to have something to think back on. So I think it just
Yeah.
depends, like you were saying, on who controls it. And that's where, this movie, I think, postulates a lot of different, good and bad sides of that, whether they have their own free will or whether America is controlling it. Because when America did, that's when the nuke went off in LA by
Hmm.
mistake because the humans made an error in the code. That's a really good point. But yeah, the
Yeah.
movie doesn't answer the question, but like you said, I don't think we have answers to these questions yet
Yeah.
because all these things are really like there were theories back when, they were making Terminator and Matrix. There were theories, and now it's becoming so we can see this future. It's like
Right.
we're close
You
to it
can
now.
visualize
So
it.
exactly, like we have these tools that we can see evolving into something like the Matrix or Skynet. They're not science fiction anymore. And it's like,
Mm.
how do we now wrestle with these questions? Which I do think the movie came apart, I don't think they planned it like this, but at the right time to be asking these questions because it is actually a future we can see as opposed to a future we can only imagine.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.